Gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and get started. My strong and diligent colleagues have joined me to help us go through that. That's right. I know other folks are. We have a committee loaded with chairmen and chairwomen. So we have them kind of moving around into various places and sharing their own committees. But I appreciate everyone being here today. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll ask for Presiding Justice Melton to come forward to speak on behalf of the Judicial Council, as well as Cynthia Clanton, Executive Director. And we'll turn to just these here. It's four entities. Presiding Justice Melton, thank you for being here. Thank you for the work that the organization does. I know this is one of your many administrative responsibilities that different members of the Supreme Court has. Each justice has assigned administrative responsibilities that are wide-ranging, and they're not small tasks. So this is one of those that Justice Melton has, and we appreciate you being here to present. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it over to Ms. Clanton, the Director of AOC, for introductory comments.
How are you? Good afternoon. Happy Valentine's Day. Cynthia Clanton, the Director of the Judicial Council's Administrative Office of the Courts. And as you recall, the Judicial Council is the policy-making body, 27 members, drawn from the leadership of every class of court and the State Bar of Georgia. The Judicial Council sets statewide policy and priorities that affect or require the participation of the entire judicial branch. As the name administrative implies, the AOC is a shared resource providing services to the judicial branch. Those services are different for every group we serve, depending on their needs and their staffing. Services we provide include IT, payroll, HR, contracts, communications, and budget. We also house various groups, including the Council of Accountability Court Judges, several court councils, and the JQC. With the resources you provide, the AOC is a client-centered entity. Our work is directed by statute, the Judicial Council, its strategic plan, and by order of the Supreme Court. And as you know, I've got the very capable Presiding Justice Melton with me, and along with the many hats he wears, he is the chair of the Judicial Council's Budget Committee. I'd also like to introduce our new fiscal officer, Drew Townsend, and Malia Wilson, our new budget director. And they've been with us about 4 months. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Justice Melton.
Does that make them experts now? Malia and Drew, they're now up to speed, fully ready to go.
They
right?
are up to speed and ready to go. It's been a quick learning curve for them.
So, Mr. Chairman, what I propose that I do, since I know time is tight, I want to hit our 4 requests, and there are only 4 highlights. And if you have questions, we have the stakeholders here to answer any specific questions you might have. First and foremost, though, I want to point out that the entire Judicial Council budget request is 1.76% above last year's budget. So it's a 1.76% increase. And want to make sure that we put that in perspective as we move forward. The first request is from the Council of Accountability Court Judges for a certification officer. The amount requested is $77,062. That includes fringes. And that is for the purpose of adding a 3rd certification officer to perform peer review and certification. The CACJ currently provides oversight over for 137 of the 149 positions. Mm-hmm. The main theme with CACJ is expansion. So They are needing this additional officer to support the addition of 36 courts that are subject to peer review and certification. They need it to support the anticipated expansion of adult felony drug courts, mental health courts, family treatment courts, and DUI courts, and support anticipated expansion of adult felony drug courts. Of course, under the statute, they're required to certify and conduct review every 2 years for certification and peer reviews every 3 years. And as they do the 2-year certification process, that's on average of 73 per year. So with all the expansion and the need to make sure that things are done well, they request this additional position. If there are no questions, I'll move to the next request.
We'll just cover all the requests and we'll circle back.
Okay. The next request is from the Institute of Continuing Judicial Education for the Electronic Media Curriculum Project Coordinator position. The House, in the supplemental budget, reduced the budget for the ICJE by $12,617. We told the Senate committee that that would be agreeable and that the ICJE could absorb that. That's a reduction to reflect savings. The only concern is that that wouldn't be an ongoing reduction, as it would impact the request for this position. The requested amount is for $34,571. The actual salary for this position is $42,000 as the base salary plus 22 in fringe, for a total of $64,260. So it anticipates those savings that were reduced in the supplemental budget. To understand the need for this position, I have to debunk one presumption, and that is judges are smart. We fake it, and we fake it based on training. And so we have a lot of new judges that come on board, and they want to get up to speed. The way it exists now, if we look for brick and mortar training, there's a lag time. There's hotel costs, there's travel costs, there's food costs. We can cut down on that lag time. We can cut down on those additional costs by having online training. Now, this training is not just playing a video. It's an interactive, participatory process. It's proctored, and it's regulated and monitored. And so this position would facilitate, set up the platforms for those to happen, for the training to happen, keep up with the registration. When things go down, as systems go down, they're responsible for getting the systems back up. And of course, we also would have the ability to have videos available to judges for tutorials and cheat sheets as they move forward and address issues that arise. The idea is that we would expand existing provision of online services and have at least 2 online classes per month going forward. The next request comes to us from the Supreme Court Committee on Justice for Children, and that's CPRS, the Court Process Reporting System. CPRS allows real-time sharing of child welfare data, especially for children in foster care, and it relates to data out of the juvenile courts and related to DFACS and Department of Education. The money would be used to train AOC and IT staff regarding core functionality. They are trying to expand the data dashboard and provide a new user interface. And the request there is for $11,275. And then the last position and the last request is from the Judicial Council itself, AOC, for an information security specialist. This request is consistent with GTA's recommendation for a information security specialist throughout state government as it relates to the executive branch. Our request is for a total of $152,015, with the base salary being $90,000. Just to give you an idea of the scope of the IT network throughout the judiciary as a whole, AOC hosts 26 websites covering the entire scope of the judiciary, and 51 organizations have additional systems that rely on AOC support, and we have over 73 listservs. So with the scope of the IT connections and interconnectivity, the desire is to have a person that would be responsible for maintaining the security and the recoverability of all those systems statewide throughout the entire judiciary. I'll pause there and entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you, Justice Melton. We have a question from our floor leader, Rogers.
Justice Melton, I want to fall back on this continuing judicial education,
Yes, sir.
and I'm a big fan of it. I mean, I believe that's where we're going, but how far behind are we?
Mr. Ashton? This is Doug Ashworth from, he's the executive director of ICJE.
I'd like to know how far behind are we, where we rank, like, not rank, but how we compare to other states, and what do we need to do to get up to speed? Because I think in the long run, it's a money saver.
I'm Doug Ashworth, Executive Director of the ICJE. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And Mr. Leader, the answer is we're about halfway in the pack. And here's my basis for that. The National Association of State Judicial Educators, NASJE is the acronym. They have a futures committee, which I have been appointed to. We conducted a survey last fall, and the survey was meant to find out how much online training or web-based learning you do. And we currently, in this calendar year, have 8 online training opportunities for our classes of judges. That puts us about halfway nationally. The most robust online training outfits would be places like Minnesota, Michigan, Arizona, those types of places. We're ahead of some, we're behind the others.
And as a follow-up, sir, is there any difference that you see as far as, I don't know how I want to say this, but the level of education you get from an online versus being there sort of thing?
There are research studies that show that you get more by an in-person interaction, but there are research studies that show that you get more from an online, web-based. I don't think that the national literature has found the exact answer to that.
Would it be fair to say that with the generations of new attorneys and judges we have coming up, that they're more probably familiar with the online, and that you'd probably start to see those numbers climb, and we may as well go ahead and prepare for it now?
Yes, sir.
Especially if we can make it more interactive. Obviously, if we just play a video, who knows what people are doing while that video is being played. And so we have ways to make it interactive, and you can monitor the actual participation by making them hit buttons and certain things along the way before they go from one module to the next.
Great. Thank you,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Judge Caldwell, or Chairman Caldwell.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, my light didn't come on down here to punch.
You want to grab a different one?
Well, I tried this one too.
Okay, hit it one more time, Judge. Hit it one more time. Okay.
I learned this from Sawmill. I think they understand me. Justice, you've asking for 3 positions, 6.1.1, 6.3.1, and 6.4.1. Of those 3 positions, which of those is most important to the council?
Oh, goodness. Usually we do try to prioritize them, but we try to prioritize them within the constituent groups.
Yes.
We did not prioritize.
We try to prioritize too with money.
Yes, sir, I understand.
That's the reason I'm asking the question.
Yes, sir. I will tell you that we did not prioritize this time, and we have done that in the past. Goodness, you put me on the spot.
That's what we do.
Yes, you do. Would you allow me to get back with you on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I will do that. Thank you, sir.
Going back to the questions about the continuing judicial education, we, at least I think 2 years ago, started a discussion with Judicial Council. This committee started a discussion about scaling back the number of in-person meetings and training sessions because of the cost associated with that, and asked the Judicial Council to look into developing online tools for that continuing continuing judicial education, so that we would cut down on those per diem costs. And so this has been an ongoing endeavor to accomplish that end, and I think that that's the purpose of having that media coordinator, is then to centralize that with one person that can be responsible, monitor both the program software to ensure that it is having the results that are intended, which are well-prepared judges doing their jobs, but also to make sure that there's accountability in that. So I just want to make sure the committee, that's new members, that that's the background on that shift. And so the Judicial Council has worked with the committee on doing that, and so we're trying to integrate that into the budget. And then to Chairman Rogers, or Floor Leader Rogers' point, it does seem to me that the trends are going towards more and more online education and more online interaction between judges and their training for a younger generation. And then it also seems to me that it's more efficient, because you aren't leaving your home, you're not leaving the court system, you're still available to take care of orders and deal with administrative issues that you have, as opposed to being the travel time that's associated with being out of the office. The other question that I had for you was all the numbers that we were seeing at lines, the increased funds at lines 6.2.1, 6.3.2, and 6.4.3. Those are all non-state dollars that are increases, so those are federal dollars that are coming in. Is that correct? Or other sources? Okay. And then the final question is dealing with the accountability courts and looking at the certification officer. We have raised the question and that, and this was more to CJCC, but in developing a baseline for these accountability courts, and you were not here for that discussion, but the committee has raised some concerns about making sure that we have a baseline for those accountability courts. We know where they start, and then we can determine by certain metrics what the success is in terms of the outcomes of the courts. It is important to us that when we've started this criminal justice initiative, we lay those baselines, we know what the floor is, and we hope that we achieve a high ceiling with that, or achieve no ceiling, but we actually have great success going forward. But you have to know where that bottom line is. Then you have to have people that can go and double check the work that's done by the various courts to ensure that your data is, the data that they're giving us or giving you, is accurate and correct. You have to have that fidelity. Otherwise, anybody can submit whatever data they want to, but if there's not someone that's going to the courts to double check, then we don't know that data is necessarily reliable. Is that in part what this certification officer will be doing?
I believe so. We have Taylor Jones and Judge Weaver here, and I'm sure they'd be happy to speak to that.
Ms. Jones, you want to?
Yes, sir, that's exactly part of what that peer review process is. It's about 5 days, and then in part of that, you will have a judge, a treatment provider, a program coordinator from one court that has been certified and trained to do peer reviews to go to another court. And for 2 days, the judge visits with the staff of all of the of that particular court they're reviewing. They talk to participants. They talk to the treatment provider. They observe the judge in court.
Is that the certification officer?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The officer will go with the judge and the program coordinator and treatment provider from we'll call that the visiting court. Then we will travel to the court to be reviewed.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Jordan, do you want to add anything to that?
I can, to Judge Weaver's comments. The certification officer that we're requesting this year will perform peer review visits, as Judge Weaver just described, but also help to execute the certification process, which is one where each court has to submit documentation to the council. That officer spends time reviewing that documentation based off of the best practice standards that are set nationally, which then evolves into our state standards, to make sure that court's adhering to them. It sometimes triggers technical assistance. And it's a process that's a lengthy one. And our officer that we're requesting this year is really the result of the increased amount of courts that we see start each year, as well as the requirement with the passage of Senate Bill 174 to now certify and peer review veterans treatment courts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then we had requested, I think, offline, some, the actual certification form and application so that the members of the committee could see that, see what the process is for vetting whether or not an expansion is necessary or an addition is necessary, and knowing what the criteria are and seeing that. So if that can be provided, that would be helpful.
Absolutely. We can do that.
Thank
Thank you.
Would you like a complete package? Say, for example, when my court submitted their package to see all the supporting documentation, a court must send in, we must send in a program manual, memorandums of understanding, contracts with a treatment provider, a lot of other documentation that might give you a good idea of the amount of work that goes into actually certification, and then that certification package is reviewed by the staff, and then it's also reviewed by the Standards and Certification Committee. For example, they're meeting Friday to certify certain courts, but it's a very thick package that goes along with the actual application.
Well, I think what we would like to see is that we'll take a look at the application and we can get with Ms. Jordan about those details. But then also, I think what I'd like to see is the evaluation criteria, what you're doing to judge whether or not there's an expansion or a new court is added. So that would be helpful.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Ms. Jordan. Any other questions for members of the committee? Okay. Thank you very much. We
Thank you, Mr.
appreciate
Chairman.
your
Thank you,
Thank you.
members of the committee.
Next group on our agenda is the juvenile courts. Kristen Wallace is the budget director. Actually, she is here. Judge Jim Whitfield from Cobb County is here today as well. And then Eric John is the executive director, and he is here. We also have, I think, a few other people. Whitney Dickens is the JDI coordinator, and Kirk Hope is CJCC staff attorney with Chins. And of course, Taylor Jones, we heard from her, and Brenda Weaver is here as well. So if you would, we'll just go ahead and turn it over to you all to present the request.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, I'm Jim Whitfield. I'm president of our Council of Juvenile Court Judges this year. And I just want to take a moment. I know our time is limited and tight for the committee meeting, but just acknowledge and let you know how well received the state grant funding increase that this committee, that Chairwoman Ballinger, Chairman Caldwell assisted us with last year on House Bill 5, that it was critical funding across the state, and particularly needed and appreciated in the more rural circuits of our state. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten Wallace, our budget director, to speak to our budget items.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Kirsten Wallace. I'm the budget director with the Council of Juvenile Court Judges. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for having us here today. I guess I'll just go through the request and then we'll take questions after. Is that okay? Okay, our first request is for the JDAI, which is the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative statewide coordinator position. And for that position, we're requesting $122,600. That position actually came out of the Georgia Council of Criminal Justice Reform Report 2017. Okay, the second request, 7.1.2, we are requesting funds for a Children in Need of Services statewide coordinator position. And then our next request is 7.1.3. We're asking for funds to provide for judicial assistance for the Family Treatment Court initiative pursuant to Senate Bill 174. That was from the 2017 session. And those are our requests for our council budget. I don't know if you want me to go ahead and jump down to the grants to counties for the, go ahead, okay. The 7.2.1, that's increasing funds for the Northeastern Judicial Circuit. This is to reflect the new judgeship that started, Superior Court judgeship, that started January 1st, 2018. And then 7.2.2, that amounts 25,000. And then the second request for the grants to counties, 7.2.2, is to increase funds to reflect the increase for JRS, which is the Judicial Retirement System. So,
Thank you, Kirsten, I appreciate that. Talking about the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative Coordinator, isn't there not a position already with DJJ that assists with that?
actually, the position's housed in our council. The DJJ funds it through an MOU that we have with DJJ.
Okay.
The funds that I think are used for from DJJ to pay for the salary for the JDAI coordinator are federal funds. We thought that possibly those funds could be moved from DJJ over to our budget, but since they're federal funds, they can't be transferred.
So,
But-
so currently DJJ is using federal funds to pay for an existing coordinating position within the juvenile courts?
That's correct.
Okay. And so is this adding a new position, an additional position, or is this just, if for some reason there's an anticipation that the federal funds will not be there and we're wanting to put state funds behind it?
Were you gonna say?
Is there,
I was, just because per the report, of the criminal justice reform from 2017, when they recommended actually a coordinator and then 2 assistant coordinators. Last year, we got the assistant coordinating position. We had already had the main coordinator position, and we're just trying to get the funding in our budget. She's actually been part of our staff. It's Whitney Dickens, to my right. She's been part of our staff since 2015. Her salary was initially paid for by the Casey Foundation. That was the pilot to get it started, the JDAI program. Once that funding stopped, then there was an MOU put together. It was, I guess, facilitated by OPB to have DJJ give us the funding, us being the Council of Juvenile Court Judges.
Okay.
So that's where the funding started.
And the comment that I wanted to make with regard to that DJJ and the MOU is obviously Department of Juvenile Justice is motivated to keep moving forward and making progress on the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative, JDAI. So the other is detention, which is on DJJ and on their budget and on their expenses. So they were motivated to help with this federal funding stream that, as Kirsten explained how that worked out under the Memorandum of Understanding. But we would just like to get this funding back in our budget so we're not subject to the federal funding going away or DJJ having to do something different based on whatever those grant criteria might be with federal funds.
okay. Would you explain what the intentions of the CHINS coordinator, outline the job description for that position?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn that over to Ann Kirkhope, our staff attorney.
Good afternoon. Like Kirsten said, my name is Ann Kirkhope, and I'm the staff attorney, but I'm also kind of a jack of all trades, and CHINS has fallen within my wheelhouse. And although Judge Sumner from Cherokee County is normally the expert on this, he's unfortunately ill and unable to join us today. So I'm going to. Yeah. Essentially, the CHINS system was originally enacted or came into effect in 2014, January 2014, with the new code. It has had somewhat of an amorphous existence since then. There's no statutorily provided agency that coordinates it like DJJ does for the juvenile justice side of things and DFACS does for child welfare. So CHINS is kind of neither one of those two and is kind of out there by itself. But it is the prevention end of the spectrum of juvenile justice and the dependency, and it's geared toward keeping kids who have exhibited some misbehavior that is sometimes called a status offense. It could be runaway, it could be what used to be called unruly, but it hasn't escalated into a delinquent act yet. So the focus of the Child in Need of Services system is to utilize local resources to wrap around a family and try to understand why this child might be acting out. And as I said, there's no sort of umbrella agency guiding the development of these resources. And counties and courts have been sort of developing their own protocols. The evolution of CHINs over the last few years, though, has suggested that developing a more uniform protocol for the state to follow might be the best way to move forward. And as a result of that, Judge Sumner and some other agencies, CJCC and the Barton Center and DJJ and DFACS have all come together and created a CHINs practice guide. And the hope there is to provide statewide uniformity while allowing for local flexibility, because those local folks are going to be the ones providing the services. But if we had a statewide person that helped facilitate and showed them how to make those services in their own communities work for the CHINs system. then
Wasn't this a recommendation of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council?
Yes.
Or I forgot the agency, the
Criminal Justice Reform Council.
Reform Council,
Yes,
thank you.
yes, indeed it was.
And how many years ago was that recommendation made?
I don't recall. It was either last year or,
The year before
I
that?
believe it was last year or the year before. I don't think it was any earlier than that.
Representative Gravely has a question.
Thank you. Ms. Dickens, you're currently serving as the Juvenile Detention Alternative Initiative Coordinator. Just a quick question. How many participants do we have in that program?
Are you talking about states?
State.
Sorry, counties?
What,
Or are you talking about employees?
counties, I guess you would say, that are participating in that?
7.
That's across the state, correct?
Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions, we appreciate the presentation. Thank you, Judge, for being here. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Prosecuting Attorneys Council. Bert Poston is the council chair. Pete Scanalakis has taken over as executive director. They ran Chuck Spahos out.
We switched one Greek for another.
That's right. So we're glad to have you both here. And Mark Williams is the budget director, the man with the numbers. And they have a presentation I'd like to give to you. We have a couple of new members, so a very, very brief history is okay to give some background, but I think we need to jump. The numbers you're asking for are substantial, so we need to jump into those numbers pretty quickly.
Certainly, certainly.
Thank you.
And to begin, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you and thank this committee and the entire House for the support that y'all have shown to us over the last couple of years as we try to claw back from the hole we got into starting in 2008 with our assistant district attorney pay. So that's something we're continuing to try to work on. It's been a long-term issue. We appreciate the support that we've received. There is a presentation everyone should have. It does track with the lines on the track sheet as far as the various request items. The first page of the presentation includes our mission statement. I'll skip through that and go directly to our juvenile court, state paid juvenile court assistant district attorneys. As we just discussed in the prior presentation, the juvenile code changed in 2014. One of the things that did is it pushed some of the responsibilities that had been done by court personnel onto the district attorney's office as an independent prosecutor to evaluate complaints and file petitions. And so part of that plan, when that code was adopted, was to, over a period of time, fund some state-paid juvenile court assistant DAs to handle that workload, as well as some assistant public defenders for that purpose. The first year, budget-wise, that we pursued that was FY16. We asked for and received 15 positions. And the map that's on page 3 of our presentation in blue shows the circuits that received those initial 15 assistant district attorneys. We felt At that time, that the greatest need was in the large multi-county circuits where you could have multiple county juvenile courts going on simultaneously. And so that's where those first round of assistant DAs went. In FY17, we asked for 15 and received 10 positions. The green circuits indicate where those were allocated, working down to more than mid-sized circuits geographically. Last year, we asked for an additional 15 and received none. So that's kind of where we're at. About half the circuits currently have at least or one state-paid assistant district attorney for juvenile court. The other half do not. Ultimately, how many are needed has never been formally decided, what that ultimate target is. I know at one point a number of around 98 or averaging about 2 per circuit was tossed out, but that's not ever been decided, and we're not to that phase yet. But rather than, since none were allocated last year, rather than putting 15 in this year, we went ahead and asked for the full 24 that would at least get us up to each circuit having an assistant district attorney to cover juvenile court. So that's where the number comes from. It's a mid-level prosecutor salary on the scale, assuming some prosecutorial experience, not someone right out of law school, with benefits, works out to about $100,000 per assistant district attorney. So that's where that number comes from. Whether this body wants to fund all 24 or something less than that, we wanted to go ahead and put the whole amount so we would kind of know where we were at and where we needed to end up, at least to get one per circuit. The next item on the budget request then is for the assistant district attorney recruitment and retention effort, and that does go back to the recession beginning in 2008. Middle of that year, there was a wage freeze in terms of being able to promote any of our assistant district attorneys. They also went through, I believe, 24 furlough days over a couple of year period. Each furlough day working out as basically a 5% pay cut that month. We eventually got past the furlough days, but it was not until around FY14 and 15 that we started really getting any money to start moving those assistant district attorneys up that pay scale. And in those in 14 and 15, we got essentially enough money to move them a half step up the scale. So it decelerated the rate at which they were falling behind, but nevertheless, by that point, they were 7 to 8 years behind where they should be on the pay scale because they had been eligible for, would have been approved for promotional steps under the scale established by statute and by the council, but funds weren't available to grant those pay steps to those assistant DAs. And one of the big problems other than turnover we've had a much higher turnover rate because of that, and I personally have seen a very experienced assistant DA leave my office because he could not raise a family on what we were paying him. But the other issue is you end up with an assistant DA with 10 years experience who's really a veteran by that point in the world that we live in, who's making a small amount of money more than someone coming right out of law school because the law school graduate's still getting hired in at the entry level, and the veteran's only been able to move a couple of steps up above that over that time period. So in FY17, we finally received enough money to begin a catch-up program. It was designed as a 3-year plan, so it would have been 17, 18, and 19 that we would have caught up thirds, basically. And so that was a huge relief to us, and again, we're very grateful for that, and the frontline assistant DAs are very grateful for that relief. In FY18, the House approved additional funding for the next third of that catch-up. That money came out on the Senate side, and in the final budget, we ended up with enough money to kind of keep people from falling further behind, but not enough money to move forward. So in this next budget cycle, rather than asking for another third and stretching that 3-year plan out to a 4-year plan, we went ahead and put all the money in that would be needed to go ahead and finish it on schedule and get everybody caught up once and for all. And so that's where the budget number comes from. Approximately $4.8 million would do that. That would involve a range of increases for assistant DAs from 0% to people that are either where they need to be or they're maxed out on the scale, up to a maximum of 30%, which represents those years that they've missed, with the average raise being about 11%. So it's not an across-the-board just percentage increase for everybody. It's really targeting, most of the money is really going to that core group that stuck with us since 2008, didn't leave to go into private practice, was loyal and really want to be career prosecutors, to try to make them whole and get them where they need to be. Now, the next item on the budget is a request, is a new item. And make sure I'm on the right page, but it is funding requested to revise our pay scale. I've lost my page.
Mr. Post, let me jump in just because I want to try to get everybody out of here by 5. It's Valentine's and I want to be respectful of that. But to just kind of clarify right here on this point, the House, this committee put in, I think it was 3.1 million. I think is what was the recommendation. Is that right? So we put in 3.1, and this was supposed to be a 5-year step increase. We were doing this over 5-year increments. And what happened was the first year, I don't think that we put any money in. The second year, we may have picked up some of the money, not all the requests. We made an adjustment, a significant adjustment at 3.1 last year. The Senate took that out, and I think left you with 900. Is that right? 950. So this is the full sale request. This request that you're making at 4.8. This accomplishes the 5-year plan, although it didn't go stepwise the way we thought it would go.
That's correct.
Okay, so
This leaves us in a position where next year we wouldn't have this line item. We'd be
correct.
essentially caught.
And then your next item is going to be that you wanted to bump up the base pay scale for those new ADAs that you're hiring, the base pay for the new ones. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that comes out of, I would rather chronologically, we get everybody caught up on the existing scale before we start fiddling with the scale. But after the funding was provided last year for GBI agents, state troopers, to adjust their pay scales up, what we found was that a starting GBI agent with a college degree is now making $48,592 a year. A starting state trooper out of trooper school, who's only required to have a high school diploma, may have more than that, but required to have a high school diploma, is making $46,422, and a starting assistant district attorney with a law degree is making $44,828.
So it sounds like there's an incentive to go into law enforcement, right? So that means less competition for folks like myself. So that may not be a bad thing. Judge, Chairman Caldwell.
Thank you, Chairman. I know that you say that your assistant district attorneys are not paid enough, but my question is, of those, if you know, how many in the various circuits are receiving supplements from the counties?
Some do and some do not. There's a lot of variation on that. There are some circuits and some counties within circuits that don't pay any supplement whatsoever.
And how many of those also have automobiles?
Again, that varies. None of my assistant DAs have automobiles. There are some circuits where, particularly assistant DAs who are in maybe an 8-county circuit and are, there's 50 miles between courthouses, it's cheaper for them to have an automobile and a gas card than to pay them mileage on their personal vehicle.
Well,
You come
I
up
would
better
just
that way. So,
guess what I'm saying, I think that would be information that this committee would need to know, because we're talking about giving pay increases. Please understand, I was DA 15 years, and so I'm certainly familiar with what you're talking about in trying to keep good personnel. But at the same time, I do know that in many circuits, they are getting supplements from the counties. And in some of the larger counties, even some of those supplements, they're getting retirement on them. So I don't want you to leave here thinking that, the people thinking that these people are not getting something else other than just the state salary that's coming across to them. And I think we would need that information to be able to judge where we're going with this.
we may have some of that information. We can try to obtain that information. Again, our position is we can't control the counties, and there are quite a few counties and circuits that don't provide any supplement. And so those assistant district attorneys have the same 7 years of law school. Many of them have the same, about an average of $100,000 in student loan debt coming out of school. And so for that starting level, based on what happened last year, and we've also looked at county paid assistant DAs, county paid assistant solicitor generals, what the assistant attorney general salary is, and revising that scale or proposing that scale and that funding to try to start the new attorneys up a little bit higher and a little bit more reasonable. salary level. But we can try to get that information.
Yeah, Mark, if you could get that information for us, Mark, that'd be great.
Yes, sir. We actually have the information for the supplements we did a couple years ago.
Yes, sir.
So,
I remember seeing that. We'll just have to refresh us on it. Okay. Representative Gravely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for my own personal information from a median perspective, what is the average time an ADA stays in that position before going on to either run for DA, become a solicitor, move on to something at private practice? What's kind of an average time those people stay? I mean, is that how?
Mark may be able to answer that question. I don't know that we have the best data on that. I can tell you when I started 25 years ago, it was a couple of years. We had a huge turnover where we were training defense attorneys and we weren't training career prosecutors. And so the pay scale and the process that we had in place up to 2008 was designed to, when we've got someone trained, we've got someone as an experienced prosecutor, that we keep them. Since 2008, we've seen a tremendous more turnover. Part of the issue is you can have an attorney come in as a county paid assistant DA for a few years and then go on state payroll, and our data from PAC standpoint is only going to show when they start as a state assistant DA. But we can try to get that information. I know the turnover rate is significantly higher now than it was, because as I said, the one I lost after about 7 or 8 years, he was married with a child and second child on the way, and it's like, I just can't keep doing this for the same salary every year when I know I can make a lot more money in private practice. And he hated to make that decision because he loved being a prosecutor. But we just couldn't, we just weren't budget-wise and ability to help him stay a prosecutor at that point.
All right, we're about 10 minutes before 5, so you have just a retention recruitment increase for the post-certified investigators in your offices, and then the 2 judicial accountability courts supplements for Lookout Mountain, Oconee.
Very quickly, the investigator pay piece, we came last year before the committee and received some funding. There's one state-paid post-certified investigator per circuit. They were in worse shape than the assistant DAs, frankly, in terms of how long it had been since their scale had been updated. And so funding was allocated last year to begin that process. They were not included in the 20% increase for the other state law enforcement. And so the money requested this year is the second year of that process. By next year, that process will be largely complete, but that is the second part of that program, to try to get their salary again up to a reasonable level.
Chairman Ballinger.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm trying really hard not to call you Bert.
That's okay.
District Attorney Poston, Bob. Anyway, as I was looking at your presentation, there's on the 5th page, extra ADA circuit split, Blue Ridge.
What page are we on?
Page 5, second to the last slide, where it says extra ADA circuit split, Blue Ridge. That's my judicial circuit. So it hasn't split since it broke from the Belforsyth circuit, I think in...
It's based on the accountability courts.
Okay.
It's the second to the last slide.
What happened, some of the circuits, or a couple of circuits when we had circuit splits, that ended up with an extra assistant DA.
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than coming back and asking for an accountability court ADA for those circuits, we repurposed that extra ADA as an accountability court ADA. So the request for additional funding for the 2 new accountability courts that have come online would bring us up to a total of all 49 circuits having accountability courts and having an assistant DA, but a couple of those were not funded specifically as accountability court ADAs. They resulted from circuit splits where you ended up with an extra one.
Okay.
And we repurposed those just to...
Okay, so that information in there was just for clarification. Whenever Blue Ridge split and the Belforsyth circuit was created.
Right, and that's been a while ago, but that
I was around
ADA,
then. I've been around for a long time, sadly. So, or good. I guess that's a good or bad thing. But anyway.
Yes, those last 2 items are the supplement for the district attorney and the 2 assistant DAs for those 2 accountability court supplements. Certainly.
Clarification, 'cause I'm like, Blue Ridge didn't split.
DA Poston, and Chairman, I appreciate you being here today. I'm sorry to rush through, but we trying to be respectful of
Thank you
the
again
time.
for your support, for what y'all do.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mark, if you could get that information to us today or in the morning at the latest, we're going to,
I will, Mr. Chairman.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
And then Superior Courts, we have Judge Steve Kelly, who is the Budget Committee Chair, and also Charles Miller, of course, is the Budget Director. Thank you all for being here, and I'll let you go ahead.
Appreciate it. Since we're short on time, I'll try to get right to the 9.31, which is the first item, is set as by the Retirement System Board. 9.32 is the cost of analyze the cost of the new judgeship in the Northeastern Circuit, which was created in the 2017 budget. And so those figures are kind of set there. The 9.33 is funds for the Joint Workload Assessment Committee. I think it's now called Special Joint Workload Assessment Committee. Approved a creation of one new judgeship this year, and that was Cobb County Circuit. So those are the funds that bill has passed out of the Senate, and so those are the funds to provide for that. The next two items I'd like to come back to and then and pass over to 9.36, which is the monies for the Accountability Court supplement to Superior Court judges, Lookout Mountain, and Oconee circuits. I know there's been some discussion about that. The Lookout Mountain Circuit, they're meeting tomorrow to do the official certification, but both, even that one, Oconee will be certified by end of April, we feel like, and the law basically says in order to receive state appropriated funds, you either have to be certified or have a waiver it means to implement and have that waiver, and both Lookout Mountain and Oconee have that waiver, and we expect both to be certified within the next, one to be certified this week and the other one to be certified in about 2 months. And the 9.37 is the money for the habeas. We have no way of knowing what's going to be submitted. They have to submit it by September 1st of every year. So we're asking for that $50,000 placeholder. This year we had 30,000 requested.
I think the House provided 30, yes.
Yeah. How much money was actually requested this past year? In 18, how much money was from the counties?
Right at 20.
Right at 20,000. Okay. But a lot of counties haven't realized that the maximum was increased from 10 to 30. It used to be it was capped at 10. And now the legislature moved that to 30. So we expect that to go up. That puts me back down to 9.34 and 9.35. 9.34 provides for a salary increase for our staff attorneys. We have 79 state-paid law clerk staff attorneys, and what we put in here was to take it from 42,000 to a new salary of 44. It certainly caught my ear just a few minutes ago when I heard, of course, that the starting GBI was 48, and I think the trooper was 46. Most assistant DAs, assistant public defenders, even they're set at 44,000, and that's what we set at their beginning salary. We had last year one of the new positions that was created went to Daugherty County Circuit, and as of today, yet he has not been able to fill it. Apparently, I know one person accepted and then found the job as an assistant DA, making roughly about 50,000, or assistant public defender. And I think he has somebody else that he's trying to get hired but has not been able to start, whether he'll actually be able to get them on or not. 42,000 for a staff attorney just doesn't quite cut it anymore. It's very, very important. The next funding we have there is for an additional 5 staff attorneys. We have 214 judges in the state, and we only have 79 state-paid staff attorneys. I was in, like Representative Caldwell, I was in prosecution for 24 years. So when I became a Superior Court judge in 2010, coming into the civil realm was quite a learning curve for me. So I went out and the staff attorney that I was able to get had nothing but civil work. She had about 6 years in the plaintiff and defense field. So and she wanted to take a huge pay cut so that she could stay home with her children a little more. And that worked out perfect because she had lots of civil experience. I had lots of criminal experience. And so it worked out really, really well. Staff attorneys mean different things to different judges, but it's critical in this day and age with our caseload, our dockets, that, to have somebody there to do our legal research, help us with legal research, drafting opinions, briefs, docket management, jail mail, motions for summary judgments. These are all critical. We have I think if you'd asked we had Justice Melton here, the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, each of those guys have about 3 staff attorneys, and I know the Court of Appeals staff attorneys start at $85,000. Assistant Attorney General start at $60,000. $42,000 is just not enough, and we desperately need to make some adjustment. So that's only like a 6% increase for the 79 that we have, and then the additional 5 would help keep us on a train of making sure that we had a staff attorney for every judge in the state. For instance, like Fulton County has 1 state-paid staff attorney, but they have 20-something judges? 20 judges. So, so counties that are bigger counties, they understand the importance of judges having staff attorneys, and they provide them. But that's not so around the state.
Can we, would you tell us whether or not there are local supplements that are paid to help offset some of that salary difference by each circuit?
There are some, I would say, again, it varies. Apparently, in Dougherty County with Judge Goss, there's either none or very little, if any, because he can't. I know the one person he had hired went for an assistant DA position.
Right.
So there's circuits. It's the same answer that the DAs gave you. It's all over the board.
Okay. But Mr. Miller, can you find that out for us?
We'd have to do we try to find this stuff out, but you basically have to write every county finance manager and try to get that. We could try. Certainly, we'll work to do that. But there are a number. For instance, like I can speak for my circuit. Yeah, my staff attorney has 12 years experience, and we supplement her salary extensively. In fact, I guess at one point in time, supplement will end up being more than her state pay.
And what's the longevity of the law clerks? How long do you keep your law clerks or your staff attorneys?
Yeah, our staff attorneys, we have one just retired. He was there for probably over 20 years. The one I have now has been with me for 7.5. We don't really use them anymore right out of law school. That's a very limited use for us right out of law school. We need people who have come and become career-minded. So the one state position that we get it has to be supplemented, otherwise it would be meaningless.
Mr. Miller, can y'all research that and find that out for us and see what the longevity of the clerks are?
Yes.
Okay.
Would you like the average, like how long the average?
Yes, the range, the shortest, the longest, and then we'll go from there, and then we'll average it out.
For those circuits who don't provide supplements and it's just the 42,000, then the instead of being a staff attorney, really more of a law clerk, they come right out of law school, they work for 1 year and then move on.
I mean, the request is for law clerk, not staff attorney, so that's.
I think that's a misnomer. I think almost all around the state, the judges have gotten away from just having, if we will call it a law clerk who just comes for 12 months and is a training ground to do something else. That's more like a public service. I know that's the way in our circuit is. We have career attorneys now that help us. So we have 5 judges and we have 3 staff attorneys.
All right. Any questions from members of the committee? Yeah, okay. Representative Gravely, go ahead.
Thank you, Judge, for your presentation. So just so I'm clear, I'm trying to take some notes here. You said you had someone that had been in the civil practice area as well as the criminal defense area. It's kind of a hodgepodge of both for 6 years.
She had been in civil defense.
She had been in civil defense. So she wanted to have a little bit more time with her family, kids. Came into your office from the state pay perspective at $42,000.
Correct.
But the county also offers a supplement
Right.
for her as well.
She would not have accepted the position if the county didn't offer her a supplement.
Okay, and that supplement is either equal to, or you said possibly
Well,
at some point could be
It,
greater.
it varies all across the state, but now, yeah, the one that worked for me gets a supplement of like 25,000.
She's up around probably salary-wise 65, 60,
65,
65,000.
67, 68,
Okay.
and she's got 12 years' experience.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Representative. That's all the questions that we have from the members of the committee. We appreciate the presentation, and thank you for all for
Thank you.
being here, and thank you for the hard work
Happy
that you're doing.
Valentine's to everybody.
Yes, thank you. With that, we will stand adjourned.
Had to
Thank you
cancel
very
my
much.
wife's dinner date tonight.